Welcome back to another LP Gallery tutorial. Today we're going to continue our Christmas series by creating some candy canes. They're going to be very realistic and very delicious looking candy canes. So we're going to do this in 3 steps. We're going to create the shape, we're going to stripe the shape, and we're going to add our shadow and highlights for the 3D effect. Now we actually have a basic shape that'll give us the candy cane shape, but it gives us a flat bottom. If that doesn't bother you, you can just leave it like this. If you'd rather have a more rounded bottom, then it's just a matter of taking the ellipse and just putting it down something like this, and you have what looks like the bottom roundness of the candy cane. Now if you want a more traditional candy cane, then what we'll do is we'll take another piece and we'll merge it to this piece to give us that roundness. So we have 2 ways to do this, and we can have wide candy canes, you can have very thin candy canes, and they're all done the exact same way. Okay, without further ado, let's get started. Now you'd probably think the hardest part about the candy cane is actually drawing the candy cane shape, but that's actually the easiest part because PowerPoint actually has a shape that'll fit the bill perfectly. So let's go get it. We're going to go to our shapes, we're going to our block arrows, and we have a shape right here called the U-turn arrow. That's perfect for what we need. So I'm going to click on that and I'm going to draw a U-turn arrow. So there it is. You can see the candy cane shape already. So the U-turn arrow has 5 shape handles. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now each one of these, of course, will affect the shape differently. The top one affects the roundness. So if we go to the left, we get it square. If we go to the right, we get it round. And that's, of course, what we want. This one here affects the second arm of the arrowhead. So you can make it longer or shorter. And of course we want it to be shorter. This one here affects the actual arrowhead itself. So if I take it up, I get a deep arrow. If I take it down, I can take it down to almost a line. So I'll just leave it like this so we can see what's happening with the arrowhead. These 2 affect both the thickness of the arrow and the width between the 2 arms. So let's see how that works. This one here will affect the width between the 2 arms and help to make the arrow either thicker or thinner. So I'm going to drag this one to the right, and when I do that, you'll see what's happening. So the 2 arms are moving far apart and the arrowhead itself is disappearing to a point. And if I continue, it kind of gets a very thin, almost like a fish hook. So I'm going to now take it back about this much. Now this one actually affects the thickness of the arms itself, but it will only work if there's an actual arrowhead visible and not just a point. So I'm going to take this one and I'm going to drag it to the right, and you can see that the candy cane is thickening out, but only to the width of the arrow, and that's it. It won't go any more than that. It stops right there. So between these 2, you get to play with the thickness and the distance between the 2 arms. So I like that. Now I'm going to take this just to make it a little bit thinner, and we have a candy cane that kind of looks like that. Now obviously we don't want a point, so we take this one and we just drag it down, and you kind of have a candy cane shape. Now I can take this and just drag it back a little bit up, and I can also just take this and round it out, and we have a candy cane shape just like that. Okay, so that part is done. The next part, of course, is to stripe the candy cane. So how do we stripe the candy cane? Well, those of you who've seen our video on creating gradient stripes knows exactly what we're going to do. We're going to create 3 gradient stripes, a red and a white and a green. So those of you who haven't seen that video, I'm just going to give you a quick overview as we do it, but if you want to get more detail, you can catch that video. Now I'm going to actually apply the stripes to this rectangle first, and then I'm going to copy to the candy cane. You'll see why in a little bit when we actually do this. So let's create our gradient stripe. So I'm going to click on the gradient tool. We get our default gradient here. Now what we have is 4 stops. Now if you recall our video on creating gradient stripes, you know that the first stop will represent the first color, the last stop will represent the last color. So the first and the last color only require 1 stop. Any color in between requires 2 stops, a start and an end color. So let's do that. I'm going to click on this stop. Let's make that one red, and I'm going to move that to the 33% position. I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to make it white, and I'm going to move that to the 33. So you can see what happens. The white stops the red right there. So I'm going to click on this one. I'm going to make that white, and I'm going to move that to the 66 position. So there's the white. I'm going to click this one. I'm going to make that green, and I'm going to move that to the 66 position, and the green stops the white from continuing. So there's your 3 colors. Okay, now we don't need an outline, so I'm going to get rid of the outline. So what I'm going to do is just copy this with my Format Painter and apply it here. It's not going to work directly the way we think it is, but I just want you to see that. If I go to my Home, Format Painter, and I apply the gradient to that, we get this. So you can see you got your red, white, and green, but that's not what you want. You want a nice repeated pattern. So you can't do it directly with the gradient tool, but you can do it this way. Now most of you have done this next technique I'm going to show you. If you've ever taken a PowerPoint shape and you pasted a picture into the background of the shape, it's the same concept. So what we're going to do is we're going to take this rectangle and we're going to have it pasted into the background of the candy cane. So it's going to be a repeated pattern like this. So it'll be the actual rectangle shape just repeating. So how do we do that? We're going to copy this again, and I'm going to click here, and in my options here I'm going to say picture or texture fill. Okay, so I'm going to click on that, and whatever the last one you used or the default is actually applied. So we got to go right here and we got to go to clipboard. So it's going to take that and it's going to apply that. So basically you can say, well, that's the same as the gradient. What's the difference? Well, the difference is this. By default, it takes whatever object you have here and stretches it to fill. Now I don't want it to stretch it, I want it to tile it. And that's one of the options of this, is that tile the picture as a texture. So I'm going to tell it to tile. So when I click on that, we get a tile pattern. So there it is. So basically it's just repeating this pattern all the way down. So when you're creating this, your stripes are created at the size that you actually need it so that they will fill this perfectly. Now you also have the option with the tiling to make the stripes bigger or smaller. So I can take this and make the stripes, if I want to be much thinner, I could maybe just make them 50% and 50%. And we have a lot of little stripes. So that's one of the advantages, of course, is that you can play with the stripes. Now I'm going to leave them at 100%. There's a slight disadvantage if you start make them too small with the next step that we're going to be doing. Obviously, that's not what I want. I want my stripes going at an angle like a real candy cane. So I don't want straight stripes that are going like that. So how do I do that? Well, the way to do that is to actually use the shape itself. And we're going to have to rotate the shape, and we're going to try to copy and paste it in there at an angle. Now I'm going to just take this and I'm going to just make a copy because I'm going to need that one for later on. So I'm going to just work on this one. Okay, so how do we do that? Well, we actually copy this and we paste it on itself. So I'm going to right click and say copy, and I'm going to select this and I'm going to just tell it to go picture and texture. Okay, I was going to say clipboard, and it gets this. Now you don't see any difference. To go, what's the difference? Well, if I stretch this down, it's going to behave like the candy cane. You're going to just see the 3 stripes. So what's the trick here? Well, we just tile it, and there it is. So I've actually pasted the pattern on top of itself. So now that I stretch it down, I can repeat the pattern. It just goes like that forever. And I'm going to stretch a little wider, and I'm going to show you what we're going to do. So I'm going to take this pattern and I'm going to rotate it. So how you want to rotate it is up to you. So which way do you want the stripes to come? That way? Or do you want to come this way? So it's up to you. You just rotate the pattern. Now this part is very, very, very important. I want this pattern to fit perfectly in the candy cane. That means this rectangle, and that's, remember, I'm going to actually paste the rectangle into this thing, has to be much wider than the candy cane. And I'm going to click on this, and just so you understand what's going to happen, I'm going to remove the fill, and I'm going to just give this a solid outline, just so you understand what's going to happen. I'm going to bring this to the front, and we're going to put it like this. So this is how it's going to be pasted. This pattern is going to be pasted in here like this. So this is why this rectangle has to be significantly larger than the candy cane. Now, one of the advantages of creating things as a tile is that you have the ability to move it. So right here, one of the options is the offset X and Y. That means once I paste it in here, I can still move my pattern this way or up or down like this. So if I want, let's say, the green to start at the top, I can actually do that by moving the pattern around. Now, in order to move the pattern around, this has to be significantly larger than the candy cane. So again, this is why this has to be quite a bit larger than the candy cane. So I think that's pretty good. I think I'm pretty happy with that. So I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste that as a picture or texture, say clipboard, and we get that. And you go, wait a minute, that doesn't look right. Well, that's because we have to tile it. So once we tile it, there's your pattern. And you're going to say, wait a minute, that still doesn't look right. And here's the last thing you have to do. When PowerPoint pastes pattern or pictures into objects, it doesn't center them. It starts with the top left. So what I need to do is have this pattern right in the middle of the candy cane. I have to have the pattern centered in the middle. To do that, I change the alignment. So right here where it says top left, I have to click here and I have to go center. And when I do that, there's your pattern. So you got to remember that when you're creating a pattern, you have to center it, and it works the best that way. So there it is. So there's your striped candy cane. Now again, we could play with the offsets here. We can move it, and maybe I'll just do that so you can see what I'm talking about. So if I play with the X and Y offsets, you can see the pattern is moving up or down, and we can move it this way, and you can see that. Okay, so you have a lot of leeway, and again, this is why the rectangle pattern here that you're using has to be much larger than the candy cane to give you that flexibility. And of course, I could also scale this. I can make the stripes smaller or bigger, but when you do that, you got to remember you're actually shrinking this. So if you really plan to make your stripes thinner or have a lot more of them by playing with the scale, then this should be much larger to give you that leeway to do that. So I'm going to leave it the way it is. I think it's perfect. Now before we continue, we're going to show how to create a more traditional candy cane that has the rounded stem rather than a flat stem. So I've duplicated this candy cane over here. I've removed the fill and I've given it a solid black outline. Now I'm going to take this shape, I'm going to merge that into that shape, and that's going to give me a roundness. So this is just a flowchart shape. I'm going to rotate it like this, and I want to merge this onto this one so they're one shape. Now I want to make sure this is perfectly aligned to this and it's the same width. And here's the easy way to do that. If you're going to merge a couple of shapes together and they have to be perfectly aligned and the perfect same width, the easiest way to do that is to remove the fill from both objects and to apply an outline, but a black outline, not a blue outline, not a green outline, not any other color outline. Black is always shown as black. In PowerPoint, if you apply a blue outline or green outline or another color outline and you try to merge these things together to line up the lines, you notice that the colors are always a little bit blurry. They're not a solid color. So if you keep it black, then PowerPoint always makes it a solid black outline. So you'll find it much easier if you make the outline black when you want to merge things together to make sure they line up. What I'm going to do is I'm going to click on this shape and I'm going to click on my candy cane. First of all, I'm going to make sure that they actually line up to the right edge. So I'm going to go to my format. I'm going to go to my line. I'm going to line up the right edge. Okay, so this is perfectly lined. I know this is right on. So all I have to do is take this one and I have to stretch it out. And so the black is on top of the black. So you can see that's too much, that's too little. And we just line it perfectly up like that. And of course you can zoom in really, really close to do that. Okay, so that's perfectly lined. And I'm going to take this because I need it for the bottom part. Now this is very important. When you're merging shapes, you got to be careful how you do this because the first shape you touch is the dominant shape. So the other shape attaches to it. So what that means is this. And this one here, I have my shape handle at the top and I want to keep it at the top. If I select this shape, which I've rotated, the shape handle is here, and then I select this shape and I merge them into one, this rotation handle will be right here. PowerPoint will assume that I want it to be rotated and the rotation handle will be over here. That's not what I want. I want my rotation handle to be at the top. So it's very important that you actually select this shape first because it's got the rotation handle, and then you select this shape. And now we go to our format, we go to our merge shape, and we do the union, and you get something like that. Okay, so we have to do the same thing to the bottom. So we take that and we bring it down here. So now I'm going to line the left sides up. So that part will be done. So I select both objects and I go to my format, I go to my line, and I'm aligning the left side. Okay, now that should be perfect. Once I've lined one side, I don't really have to move the other side. And this part here is just up to me, how much of a roundness I want. I can bring it up, bring it down, and that's perfect. So once again, I have to click the background candy cane. I have to click the candy cane first, and then I have to select the shape. Okay, because I don't want my rotation handle to move. So I'm going to go to merge shape and union, and we have it there. So you can see my rotation handle has retained to the top. So keep that in mind. Generally, when you're doing things like that, you want to keep your rotation handle in the same position that it originally started. Okay, so now I'm going to just take this and I'm going to apply the fill to this one. So I'm going to copy that fill and just apply it to this. And so we get the same thing. Okay, so there's the two candy canes. The next step, of course, is to make them look like realistic candy canes. There's a very simple step to do this. Right now, these are very flat, cartoon-like clip art candy canes. They don't look realistic. I want to give a little more body to this. So before I apply shadows and highlights to it, I'm going to actually apply one of these nice little effects here. I'm going to go to my effects over here, and I'm going to go down to my 3D format. Now I'm not going to actually apply a 3D format, although you can. You can apply the 3D bevel to it, the rounded one, if you want to play with the parameters, and you will get kind of a rounded candy cane, but that's a little too much work. So what I want to do is I want to apply one of these lighting effects. Now a lot of people don't realize that you don't need to apply a bevel to use a lighting effect, and this is what the lighting effects do. I'm going to apply lighting effect to this one, and you'll make a comparison between the two of them. So I'm going to go to lighting, and I'm going to apply one of these warm colors. I want this candy cane to be nice and warm, so I'm going to apply one of these nice morning colors. It's kind of a golden hue to it, and it gives you something like this, and immediately you get something that has a little more body to it. It almost looks like it's a bit in the shadow. So when you compare the two of these together, you can see that this has already a three-dimensional quality to it. So I do that a lot. I like to use these colors, the lighting colors from the bevels, to apply to my objects just to give it a little more body. So I'm going to do the same thing here, apply the same thing. Now if you want a little more color, you can go a little darker, and of course this one will be a little too dark, but you can see what it does. It still gives it the feeling of a three-dimensional quality object. Okay, so we apply a nice gold to it. We get a nice gold color. I think it looks a little more realistic. All we have to do now is to apply shadows. So I'm going to click on this one, and I'm going to apply shadows. Not the way you normally apply drop shadow. Now when you normally go to shadows, you're using a drop shadow like this and applies a shadow to the outside. I'm actually looking for an inner shadow, and you'll see what that does. So I'll just take one of these and we get an inner shadow. Now I don't like the black because it's too dark, so I'm going to go to my color and I'll just use one of these dark greens, and we have a little softer shadow. Now it still looks very flat, so the trick is here, the blur. We just take the blur and we get something like that, and it gives it a little more of a shadow. You can see the shadow is softly blurred, and it gives it the roundness of the candy cane. Now what's great about this is that I can rotate the angle. So right now I've got the shadow coming this way over here. I can go to my angle and I can rotate the angle whichever way I like it. So you can see I've got the shadow going the other way. So it's up to me how I want the shadow to go. So that looks pretty good. It looks pretty three-dimensional. Now I can take this one and I can apply this shadow, but I can try one of these. So this is going to be an inner shadow, one on both sides. So it depends on how much depth you want in this and how much of a shadow you want. So if I click on this one here, I get shadow on both sides. Once again, I'm going to go to, I think, a green. So I get a softer shadow, it matches more to the candy cane, and I'm going to play with the blur again, and we get something like that. Okay, so again, you get something fairly rounded in there. Now you can't play with the angle on this one because you have the shadow going on both sides. The angle itself won't have much of an effect on this. Now you could also play with the distance like this. You can move them like this, but I think probably just leaving the distance where it is probably the best thing. So here we have two candy canes. We have the nice little golden light applied to it, and we have two inner shadows applied to it. So it's looking pretty good. The next step is our little reflection. That is what's going to seal the deal and make this look very realistic. Okay, the last thing to do is to give ourselves this highlight area, and that's going to give it that last little bit of three-dimensional quality, and you'll be amazed what that does. Just by doing that, it'll really pop into 3D. Okay, so I'm going to use this candy cane for the basis for that white highlight area there. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to duplicate it, and I'm going to remove the shadow, and I'm going to remove the nice gold color because we don't need that. And what I'm going to want to do is use a white gradient in here. So I'm going to use a white gradient that I'm going to make partially transparent. That's how we're going to get this bright spot and where it fades to the bottom there. Okay, so I've got that, and let me go to my fill, and I'm going to say gradient, and of course it remembers your last gradient that you worked with. So we had the red, white, and green. I'll just remove one of these, And I'm going to move this here. I'm going to move that there, and I'm going to move that here. Okay, so I want 3 stops, and I want them to be all white. So I'm going to click on that. I'm going to make them white. And I'm going to make this stop and that stop, the first and last, totally transparent. So I'm going to make that transparent. I'm going to click on that one. I'm going to make that transparent. Okay, so we have that. It looks like this. Now I'm going to take the shape handle here, and I'm going to make that very, 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 very thin. And I'm going to just squish it into here. So just use these handles, squish it all down, make sure it fits. And I still have my shape handle. I'm going to do this, and I just bring it in like this. Okay, so how thick you want this reflective area is up to you, but I think maybe a thin area like this. Now all I have to do is rotate this. I can rotate the angle of the fill, so I want my bright spot here. So now I'm going to rotate it, and you can see what I got. And we have something like this. So if you take a look at that, it looks quite reflective. It looks quite three-dimensional. And again, you can still move it around, and you can still use the shape handles, drag it up, drag it down, and play with it the way you like. So there it is. That gives it a very realistic three-dimensional quality. Now I'm going to take this one, and of course I'll just apply it to this one right here. And we're going to stretch this down. And we can do the same thing here. We'll stretch this one down, and you get the same thing. So there's your nice, highly reflective candy canes that look very, very realistic. Now you can also play with these reflected areas. So if you thought they were too bright, you could also take them down. So I could take the center one, which is the really bright one, and I could take the transparency down on that one too if I thought it was too bright. So there's a lot to play with. You can also take these edges in. If you bring them in like this, you get less reflection. You can see the reflections are disappearing. So if you like that a little better, you can also play with that. So remember, when you merge your shapes though, this is no longer the U-shape arrow. That's why we have to use this one. So if you merge your shapes, you may have to go and redraw a U-turn arrow shape to get this highlight reflected area. Okay, so that looks pretty good. Now the last thing maybe is this part here. I don't mind this flat part here, but if you'd rather have something a little rounded like a real candy cane, then all we have to do is make a little ellipse. We'll take a little ellipse like this. We just draw a little ellipse, and we're going to get rid of the outline. And all I'm going to do is give that like a gray color, something like this, one of these nice little gray colors. And we can just put it kind of here. We can flatten it out. And we have the bottom of the candy cane like that. So if it's really important that you want to see the bottom like that, you don't like the sharp cutoff edge, then you have something like that. You could also, if you want, you could take this, and if you really want to make it look more like a candy cane, you could take one of your stripes here and fill it in the ellipse and have a stripe pattern at the bottom. So if you want that, you can also do that. So I'll just take that, and I'm going to format painter, apply that to this, and we get that. So I'll just take this, and what I'm going to do is give it a little bit of shadow. I'm just going to go here to my shadow. I'll apply the inner shadow into the middle. We have something like that, and I can put that there. Now the beauty is, of course, that I can rotate this fill. So I'm going to rotate the fill, and we might get something that looks like that. So you got this that kind of looks a little more like the bottom of the candy cane. It has a little striped color, so it kind of matches the rest of the stripes, but that's a little more work, and it's not really necessary. But if you like it, you can do that. But if you want, you can just put a little gray circle like that. So either way, it works quite well. Okay, so there's our delicious looking candy canes. And you still have the option, by the way, with this, if you want a thick candy cane, is you can still make it thinner. So we can always do this, okay? And we play with this. So remember, if you keep it as a U-turn arrow shape, you still have the ability to make it thicker or thinner, where this one, you can't. This one is set as it is because it's a merged shape. And there you have it. You have beautiful candy canes, very realistic looking, beautiful stripes to them, and it all started with that simple little PowerPoint U-turn arrow shape. If you've been watching our videos, you know that we try to encourage you to look at the shapes and reimagine them into other things. So who would have thought that a U-turn arrow shape could have created a candy cane? But there it is. So thank you for watching, and if you like this video, we hope to catch you on our other videos. We have a lot more to do, not only on Christmas clip art, we have Thanksgiving clip art, we have all kinds of things on just basic clip art. And again, most of it is just using simple shapes and showing you how to reimagine them into other things. And again, our emphasis in Clipboard is always trying to make something look a little more realistic rather than cartoony. Thank you for watching, and we hope to catch you on the next video.